if being able to make more money is something that is important to a particular set of workers, that's something that they can get in the contract, and that is something that this union president was lamenting that the company refused to allow.
Which side are you on?
Here in Alabama, everybody knows that the big campaign is with the UAW. And last week we talked about the Hyundai, the announcement that workers at Hyundai had hit 30%. And we kind of alluded to the anti-campaign by Ivey in the business class. But we didn't really dive too deep into it. And so we wanted to spend some time this morning talking about that. And so right now in Alabama, there are probably some 3,000 or 4,000 auto workers that have signed cards, something like that. Almost 50% at Mercedes and 30% at Hyundai. And the Council of Bosses, the Business Council of Alabama, and Governor Ivey, their response so far has basically, there have been four key points in their anti-campaign. And that is, one, that the UAW is an out-of-state special interest, and we don't like things that aren't from Alabama. The second is that unions are scary, and so under that you've got some subheadings like you'll make too much money, that's scary. You'll have to pay dues, that's scary. And the employers won't be able to reward productive workers anymore. Very scary. Union's scary. So that's the second. Union's scary. The third is that you've got it good, actually. You should be thankful that we allow you to exist in this state and have a job. You're welcome. That's their argument. Your life shouldn't be any better. That's number 3. And number 4 is they're raising the Spectre of Detroit with the explicit argument that the UAW is responsible for the decimation of the auto industry in the United States. So those are the four main pillars of their response. Out-of-state special interest, union scary, you don't deserve a better life, and raising the Spectre of Detroit. So we're going to respond to those. And first off is that the UAW is an out-of-state special interest group. And that is something that's word for word out of Ivey's op-ed. It harkens back to, the outside agitator slur in the civil rights movement, right? We're all a part of, whether or, we're part of the same country, part of the same class, the working class, right? So I, have got much more in common with a worker from Michigan than I do with
Ivey.
With Ivey, right? So that's one thing. Just on its face, it's kind of a silly thing. The UAW is an obviously American institution. And so whether or not the UAW is headquartered out of state, not super relevant. But it's also worth noting that particularly in Mercedes, there has been, ongoing and sporadic union activity basically since the plant opened. And they've had an organizing committee there for years. And so when the momentum started to pick up around labor, particularly after the UAW's contract, it was not the UAW that reached out to the people at Mercedes. It was the organizing committee at Mercedes that reached out to the UAW and said, we are interested in unionizing. We think that we have a real shot right now, and we want to take advantage of it. But we feel like we've gotten screwed by the UAW in some of our former campaigns. We feel like we have not been in control of it. We feel like the investment hasn't been there, and we've really been left in the lurch. And so we have to have your commitment that we're going to be in the driver's seat of this campaign, the people at Mercedes, and that that as long as there's interest here, y'all aren't going to leave us in the lurch. And the UAW agreed to that. And the workers at Mercedes said, if you don't agree to this, we're going to form an independent union. Okay, so obviously, particularly at Mercedes, saying that this campaign is being pushed by out-of-state special interests is just so far from the truth It's hilarious. And then another thing that's worth noting about out-of-state special interests is that the employers that she is defending, not a single one of them are from the United States. They're all not even out-of-state special interests. They are literally foreign special interests, right? They're not even American companies. Mercedes, Hyundai, Toyota, Honda. All of these companies are from out of the United States. They are foreign entities. And these are the companies that she is standing in front of at the behest of, serving, while telling Alabama workers that if we organize in cooperation with other American workers, that makes us scary and outsiders, right? So it's just kind of, that's an ironic thing that the workers are being tarred with this out-of-state slur while she is defending literal, actual foreign companies.
Right.
And then even their United States headquarters are not in Alabama. There's not a single one of these companies that have their U.S. headquarters in Alabama. They're all outside of Alabama. So even the companies, insofar as they have an American presence, they're out-of-state special interests. It's just absurd. Unions. Are unions scary? Okay, so one of the things that they say in there, and they've got this website, Alabama Strong or whatever, that's the name of the campaign that the Council of Bosses is putting on in close coordination with the state government, which that seems like it should be illegal. The government colluding with employers to try to dissuade their workers from taking advantage of their constitutional rights. That's wild. That's legal. But one of the things, literally, is that your pay's going to be too high, and that's going to increase costs, and it's going to create tension, right? It's going to create tension because you're going to increase the cost. You're going to make too much money, and it's going to increase the tension on the shop floor. And I think the thing that actually causes tension is when workers' wages are falling and profits are rising. I think that's the thing that causes tension, and
Right.
That's the thing that's been happening. These companies have all been seeing record profits, and workers' wages have been falling. In Alabama auto workers make 11% less than they did 20 years ago. 11% less. That is a big chunk of change. So, no, I actually don't think that workers making more money is going to create a strained relationship. I think that would actually probably make the relationship a little bit better, in fact. Make it a little bit easier to go to work. Make it a little bit easier to do what you're told. If you're paid more money, that's how it works for me anyway, right? The more money that you pay me, the more I'm willing to do whatever you want, right? Somebody asked me, I said something about, I don't know, something about yard work needing to be done, or maybe I can't even remember what it was. I was talking to somebody, but something needed to be done, and they were like, well, why don't you do it? And I was like, well, pay me $40 an hour, and I'll take off of work and I'll do it for you.
Right.
So yeah, it's actually gonna make the relationship have less friction, I think. There's also the fear around paying dues. Right? Dues are so scary. And actually, no, dues are very important because we have to have, as workers, resources to be able to organize and to be able to support ourselves. And so if everybody gives a little bit, that turns into a lot of money, right? We don't have huge resources otherwise as a working class. We don't have the same resources that the owning class does. And so we have to all contribute a little so that we can end up with enough money to run an operation. It's the same way that church operates. A lot of people go to church, and a lot of people even go beyond donating money monthly to their church. A lot of people tithe, actually give 10% of their income. And I have never heard of union dues exceeding 1% to 2% of your income, right? And 1% is actually, I've even heard of it being less. My dues are less than 1% of my income, actually. Like, actually, my dues are 0.5% of my income, okay? So it's a pretty good investment, actually. And in a lot of union workplaces, you're going to get health care that is miles above what you would get in a non-union workplace. You're going to have retirement plans, but potentially pensions, right? So union dues are, in fact, the best investment that most working people make in their lives. There are so few things that give you so much for so little monetary investment. And then there's the thing about the high achievers. And this is an interesting one because of a conversation that I had this weekend, actually yesterday, with a union leader. And it was about the Decatur Hyosung plant. That's formerly a Goodyear tire plant. Now it's owned by Hyosung, a South Korean company. And after Goodyear left, they switched the pay system from a piece rate system to an hourly rate. And so, before actually the South Korean company came in and bought the tire plant, the union had actually negotiated to pay based on production, right? And so so one of the things that he was complaining to me about in their contract is that actually, no, the company will not let us incentivize higher production, right? I mean, like, just the total opposite. And that's obviously, look, I'm not saying that this is the way that every single, but what I'm saying is that the workers negotiate the contract. And so if being able to go above and beyond and make more money as a result of that is something that is important to a particular set of workers, that's something that they can get in the contract, and that is something that this union president was lamenting that the company refused to allow in the contract.
Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
But generally speaking, now it's true that generally you're not going to have a piece rate system of pay. That's not typically how most union contracts operate. But there are obviously ways in union contracts that employers can give bonuses or performance incentives, things like this. And the only difference between being able to do that under a union contract and not doing it under a union and doing it in a non-union shop is that there is standards. There are standards there, right? And it's not all willy-nilly at the whim of the boss, subject to favoritism. There are standards. And so, that's the thing that actually employers don't like, right? Because the employers want the unilateral authority to be able to do whatever they want, whenever they want, and reward or punish anybody for any reason, right? And that's the thing that they don't like. That's the thing that they're concerned about. And also, Adam put in our note stock a very good point. Here's a question for anti-union people. Do all non-union shops reward high achievers, right? If you've been in the workplace in the United States of America, chances are you've worked in a non-union shop before.
There's at least a 90% chance.
There's at least a 90% chance that you have worked in a non-union shop before. And think back to that job that you had, or maybe that you have. Does it reward high achievers? I mean, some do, sure, no doubt. That 90% of the American workforce is non-union, so undoubtedly there are some that reward high achievers. But I know at multiple of my jobs, high achievers were not rewarded. In fact, and actually what happened is if you were a high achiever, you got more shit put on your plate, right?
Yep.
Right? You do a good job, and your reward is that you got to do more work. Okay,
right.
So there's some questions there for these people. That for obviously the question's not for the companies or for Ivey because they know the answer and they know that they're full of crap and that they're trying to sell you a bag of crap, right? But for the people who are hearing Ivey and who are hearing the Council of Bosses and they're saying things like, we won't be able to reward high achievers. It's understandable. that the first thing that you think is like, oh, well, if I work hard, I want to be rewarded for that. I want to be rewarded for that. That sounds good. Well, just think about in your non-union job, are you rewarded for hard work?
Right. Is Mercedes and Hyundai really rewarding high achievers right now? What's stopping them from that? It's not the union.
Right. Yep. They have literal unilateral, they can do anything that they want without the union there. And they're not doing it. And they didn't announce these raises they haven't announced a big raise at Mercedes, but they announced, fairly substantive raises at Hyundai and at Toyota. They didn't announce those until the UAW contracts came out, putting pressure on those companies. They could have done that at any point, at any time over the last several years. The money has always been there to make this decision. They only chose to do it because they were concerned about their workers standing up. Okay, so that's number one and number two. We have successfully dismantled, with facts and logic, the first and the second. Out-of-state special interests, the UAW? Not really. Not really. And also, if we want to talk about special interests, let's look at the foreign car companies, okay? Second, are unions scary? No, not really. It'll be good for you if you make more money. Dues are a good investment, and you can obviously reward high achievers and high productivity workers in a union shop. The only difference is that, you got to have a process for it, and you can't just do it, based on favoritism. And also, non-union shops don't all reward high productivity workers. Okay, so number three, their third argument is that you don't deserve to have a better life. And that's what it comes down to, right? That's what it comes down to. You don't deserve to have it better than you have right now, because right now you are highly skilled and highly paid, according to the governor of the state of Alabama. You are highly paid, not like, highly paid. That is that's a strong word. It is not, you are well paid, or you are, paid competitive to the market, or you are adequately paid. You are highly paid. That would actually, being highly paid actually kind of implies that you probably should be making less, right? That's the implication of Kay Ivey saying that Alabama auto workers are highly paid. If you're highly paid, then you're pretty lucky, actually. Maybe you don't even deserve that, is kind of the implication there, if you're highly paid. Well, Alabama auto workers are not highly paid, actually. Alabama auto workers are paid significantly less than auto workers in the rest of the country. Alabama auto workers are also paid significantly less than Alabama auto workers 20 years ago. 11% less. 11% less than auto workers in this state 20 years ago. The average Alabama auto worker wage right now is $64,000, something like that. $64,000 is the median, okay? That is the median wage. That means half of the people make more than that, and half of the people make less than that, okay? And saying that the median is $64,000 really does not do justice to people who are coming into the workforce and trying to get a job. Because if you graduate high school, you don't want to go to college, you want to work in industry, and you're looking at the auto industry, and the governor says, oh, wow, I'm highly paid. And then you look at the stats and you see that the median Alabama auto worker makes $64,000. You say, wow, $64,000 right out of high school? That sounds like something that that's not too bad, making $64,000 right out of high school. And if that was the case, that wouldn't be too bad. If you started at $64,000 and then you increased, that would actually, we would be talking about being, adequately compensated, something like that. But actually, if the median is $64,000, that means half of the workers make less than that. And if you come in, all of these auto companies have implemented a tiered compensation system. That means that if you go into work at any of these companies, you don't even have the chance, talk about rewarding high productivity workers, you don't even have the chance to make as much money, the top wage, as people who have been there for 10 years. Your top out rate is lower than theirs is, and it will never be the same as theirs. Right? I mean, there's no incentive there to move. There's no possibility to move into the first tier of employment. It's the second tier, and you're stuck there forever, making between 50 and 80% less than other workers doing the same job in the same facility. And you've also got the plague of temporary employees who typically make 50% less, something like 50% less than other auto workers, with no guarantee of moving into permanent employment. While you're a temporary employee, you don't get the same benefits, you don't get the same leave, you don't get the same rights on the job that you only really have rights on the job if you're in a union workplace. But in a non-union workplace, sometimes after 90 days or something, after on a probationary period, you'll be granted some privileges that the company can take away at any time for any reason, but as long as it's fine for them, they're going to give you these privileges. You don't even get that as a temporary employee, and there's no like time scale to get on. It's just kind of at the whim of the employers. In some places there's a time scale, but again, it's at the whim of the employers, and in some places it's not. You can be a temp for 5 years, 10 years. So actually, I think Alabama auto workers, their lives should be better, actually. That's my hot take. Alabama auto workers deserve more, as opposed to Kay Ivey's position that they don't deserve more. And then finally, the Spectre of Detroit. And this is probably the most scary to auto workers in the state of Alabama, because this has been beat into our heads from, for people like me in my age cohort, basically all of our lives. That's all that we've heard, is that the unions are responsible for the decimation of the American auto industry. And that just does not square with the facts. That does not square with the reality. With the reality of the fact that the UAW, since the 1970s, has been taking concessionary contracts, not having raises to meet inflation, cutting pension, cutting health care. Since the 1970s through to 2008, every single contract was a concession on the part of the workers. All the while, executive compensation continued to increase. The executives were not taking concessions. They were not making concessions. They continued to make more while the workers took concessions. And then in 2008, the auto workers gave more concessions than they ever have. Billions of dollars taken from the pockets of auto workers to save the American auto industry. And they still have not gotten back everything that they lost in 2008. Even after these record contracts, they still have not gotten back everything that they lost. And yet, automotive executives in the big three make more money than they ever have in the history of the company. Right? And so when we actually look at, and then also, they haven't been playing this card too much yet, interestingly, but no doubt they will. And that card is the corruption card, the union corruption card. Now, one reason maybe they aren't playing it is because there's common knowledge that the leadership in the UAW is a new reform leadership that ran explicitly in part against corruption, and so maybe that's one reason they're not playing it right now. But there was corruption in the UAW. There was bribery from the companies to the union leaders, and multiple union leaders have gone to prison for it from the UAW. And also, this isn't really talked about, but so have car executives, car company executives. And so you got to think about that for a second, and think about that in the context of the talking point that unions are responsible for the decimation of the American auto industry. Okay, so you've got this talking point. Unions were so greedy that they took so much money from the companies that they went bankrupt. At the same time they're doing this, they're also, it later comes out, taking bribes from the company, bribes so egregious that they had to go to jail for it, right? And so then if you think about those at the same time, that kind of becomes hard to square, right? What is going on here? The companies are bribing the union to take so much money from them that they go bankrupt? Is that what's going on? No, that's not actually what's going on. Right? The car executives are bribing the UAW leaders to take more and more concessions, to not fight on behalf of their members. That's what actually happened in reality. Okay? So no, the UAW was not, you cannot make the case with the facts. You cannot make the case that the UAW was responsible for the decimation of the auto industry. What you're left with is globalization ushered in haphazardly by Democrats and Republicans in the 90s with NAFTA, and bad financial decisions by the American automakers. That's what you're left with. And that actually squares with reality, right? That actually makes much more sense with what we know about the facts on the ground. So those are the things that, those are basically the four things that the campaign is centered around right now. And those are things that you should think about as they make these arguments. It's also worth knowing, going back to the third point, that you don't deserve a better life if you're an American auto worker, thinking about the safety issue. The safety issue is huge. Alabama auto workers are in much more danger than auto workers in the rest of the country. And so, the way to address that is a union contract, a safety committee, real safety protections in your contract, because the company is not going to do it on their own. And the state of Alabama has no safety department and no safety inspectors, so they're not going to help you out. And the federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration is so overburdened and understaffed and underfunded that they're probably not going to be able to help you either. So you got to do it yourself. You got to unionize, get a union contract, and get some good safety protections in there, and have a union safety committee. That's the thing that's actually going to help you. So, I think that's kind of my spiel on the anti-UAW campaign here in the state of Alabama. I wrote a much more condensed version of that in AL.com you can find, and the Alabama Political Reporter. So Adam, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I just want to say it's worth repeating that the status quo that they're defending is not working for working people, right? Alabama is one of the worst places to be a working class person in the entire developed world. Where would you rather be than Alabama? Well, there's a hell of a lot of places as a worker when it comes to your compensation, your safety, your benefits, your rights, your quality of life. Alabama ranks at or near the bottom of everything good, at or near the top of everything bad.
Right.
You just name it.
Right.
Look at the statistic, whatever it may be. If it's about our quality of life, it's about anything involving what it's like to be a regular, everyday person in Alabama. It's atrocious. It's not acceptable. It's just not acceptable, and that's what they're defending. It's not working for most people. I think, intuitively recognize that, though in some senses, I think a lot of people in Alabama aren't sure it could ever be better. I think is part of the problem. But, that's the model that they defend, where we, the taxpayers, fund economic development. We fund the profit generation of these massive corporations, both through our tax dollars and through our labor, right? And that's just, it's wild that, that's the status quo that is being defended here. Because Alabama pitches itself to companies like Hyundai and Mercedes with cheap labor, right? They sell themselves, hey, you're going to get hostility to the unions from our government. You're going to get cheap, less educated labor that you can pay less, that you can treat worse.
Mm-hmm.
You might even get convicts. You might even get children to work for you. Don't worry. We're not going to look too hard. Right? You can pollute the environment. Don't worry. No one's going to be checking up on that. Not in Alabama. Right? And that's what they want to defend. And they think that is good enough for you and me.
Yeah.
And I don't. And I think there's a lot of people in Alabama who know that we deserve better. and know that, the tremendous wealth that we create, at least some of it ought to go back to us, right? Right? Not just out-of-state investors, not just out-of-country investors, not just big corporations, not just the wealthy property-owning elite, the big landowners and the big mules in Montgomery who run this state, right? Not just the Business Council of Alabama, but what if everyday working people were actually benefiting from the wealth creation in the state of Alabama? So, yeah, I appreciate you really dispelling these arguments and putting something out. Your longer version is an AL Political Reporter. The short version, AO.com. Y'all definitely, folks listening, share that around. If you know anyone working in the auto industry in Alabama, talk to them about the union. Listen to them. Listen to what concerns they may have. Hear out what kind of anti-union garbage they've heard, because there's a lot of it. There's so much of it that flies around, that is circulating from low-level managers, from people at the top, and everything in between, from other workers who've been, just bombarded with propaganda. And, something maybe we can talk about here in a sec is the need for labor media to be able to combat this kind of stuff. But, that's a separate conversation. But, yeah, I really appreciate it. I think it's a broken status quo that they're defending. The facts bear that out. And it's just going to be up to working people to organize and to build a better Alabama that really works for all of us. And I think the UAW organizing in these auto facilities is a huge, huge piece of that. It's a historic move. And if and when we see these victories, I think it's really going to lend a lot of people power to Alabama.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.